So after all the excitement yesterday of all of that Pacific content being shown off in various videos on the internet, I hope you caught as much of that as you possibly could. I do actually have something else that I want to talk about, but unfortunately, I'm not allowed to show you any gameplay of it just yet. Today, we're going to talk about the upcoming map for Battlefield 5 Pacific, Wake Island. This is launching in December. Now, DICE allowed myself, the other game changers, and all of the press at the capture event last week in Stockholm to play a couple of rounds on this brand new map. We got to play one on Breakthrough and one round of Conquest to really get a feel for it, and just to give everyone a greater idea of where DICE is going with the Pacific Theatre in Battlefield 5. Now, the reason that I can't show you gameplay is because the map in DICE's view wasn't up to the standard that they felt the map needed to be before it could be shown publicly, which is totally understandable, I guess. You want things to look the best they can before they go out there in the wild. Now, in my view, obviously taking that opinion into account from DICE, the map was still in a very near finished state, but there were a few small things that needed to be polished. Complete projects like Iwo Jima and Pacific Storm, you can tell that they're ready to go. There were certain areas of Wake Island where you could see some small tweaks needed to be made to bring things up to par, so it became clear the more I played through the couple of rounds that I got to play that DICE didn't want to show this off yet because, well, it wasn't quite finished, but it really wasn't that far away. That being said, I am allowed to talk about what I played, so I thought I'd do that today in this video. So, to begin with then, the map is still very much Wake Island that you know and love from previous Battlefield games. It's not like DICE has gone out of their way to completely change how the map looks or plays. The scale of it, the distinctive horseshoe shape, the narrow strip of land, it's all still there. It's very much Wake Island as you know it. As with previous iterations of the map as well, it appears that DICE has put most of their focus around the airstrip that sits at the point of the atoll where the land changes direction. But I'm going to list off some of the locations, and I'm going to start with the top of this image here on Peel Island. And this is just to give you an idea of where I'm talking about on the map, because of course I can't show you any gameplay, so it might be a little bit difficult to follow where I'm going, but that's what the map's for. So we're going to start here on Peel Island. There's a location here with a bunch of construction happening, with construction vehicles. There's half-built buildings here that kind of populate the area. It's a bit of a throwback to the Battlefield 3 version of the map, where you could also find a bunch of half-built locations across the map. Then, crossing over a large wooden bridge onto the main Wake Island island, if that's what you call it, you come up on what appears to be some kind of civilian inhabited area. There's lots of wooden buildings here that create this kind of village. Moving along towards the centre of Wake Island, you follow this road that connects into the airstrip location, and the land that's in between it, it's kind of just like green vegetation. There's lots of trees here, lots of bushes, and there's a couple of trench networks that sort of move their way up to the airfield location, but the first building that you're going to see is an aircraft hangar. It's the same size as the ones that you see on the Al Sundan map over by the airfield over there. It's not the same size as the one on Aerodrome that's made of concrete. This one's made of that sort of metal sheeting. Up here, the land is mostly covered with unused airplanes that are sitting on the ground. You can't take off in those airplanes. They're just there as props, but they provide a lot of cover to the infantry who might be moving around that location. At the point of Wake Island where the land changes direction, there's this large barracks location that sits alongside the runway that then stretches out onto the other arm of the island. And there's these concrete structures that are dug into the ground for kind of like storing ammunition. It's a really unique looking location, this one. Then further along, there are elements to the end of the runway. Round the bend of Wake Island, you go right down the runway, and there's an oil tank location at the end of it, which breaks up again what would be another long strip of unused land. It plays host to another capture location on Conquest, and I believe there's also another point further on behind that on Wilkes Island, although to be honest, our breakthrough round didn't reach that far, and on Conquest I didn't go to that location because the round ended quite quickly. Just we ran out of time in the capture session. Now, speaking of the two different game modes, we played Breakthrough and Conquest here. I'll describe how a game of Breakthrough really works. The attackers start by pushing onto Peel Island from boats out in the sea, and they have to secure that construction area. Once they hold that area, they then have to push over the wooden bridge or across the water onto the other island into the village area, which is actually a lot more difficult than it sounds. Due to the rather unique layout of the islands here, the wooden bridge, it sort of sits to the side of this bulge on the side of Wake Island, and that bulge allows the defenders a really, really good view across what is quite shallow water towards the previous objective. So the attackers really have to use all the cover that they've got, which isn't a huge amount. Luckily, there are a few fortification positions that you can build, but you are pretty much in full firing line of the defending team. That said, they are a good 200 to 250 meters away, so snipers are really the only ones that are going to be able to reach you here. If you end up using this outside section where this bit of land sort of juts out the side of Wake Island, you're going to attract attention very, very quickly because it's so easy to see attackers as they're moving forward. But if you use the other side of the wooden bridge, the inside of Wake Island, and use some of the water in the lagoon there is a little bit more cover to be had. And because there is less land available for the defenders to use, you can push up a little bit quicker as the attackers over the other side. In general in this sector though, there isn't that much cover, and simply brute forcing towards the defenders en masse as the attackers, that was kind of just the best solution we had to get between the two sectors, and it's the one area of the map that I really felt might need a little bit of extra work. And when I say a little bit, we really just needed a little bit more solid cover to fall behind as we were attacking. The defenders really had nothing other than bushes and trees to use, and a few fortification positions which were only at crouch height, so the moment you stood up, you were just going to get your head sniped off. We did say that during a feedback session, there was a suggestion made that some more fortification positions could be added for the attackers. It would make it just a little bit easier for them to push more effectively, and they wouldn't lose so many tickets in the process. Of course, this is a 5-sector breakthrough map, so there's plenty of work that you have to do to get through Wake Island, and you don't really want to be losing 100, 200, 300 tickets in the second sector. Once the attackers move up and capture the village though, which did eventually happen, they can then push on to the aircraft hangar location and then capture that. Now, if I remember correctly, this is a single capture point sector, so it's 32 versus 32 over one flag in a very narrow restricted play space, which does make things very, very chaotic, but tanks are introduced at this point, I think, so they're able to help the infantry advance forwards or defend that capture point a little bit more easily. The next sector then takes you onto the airstrip itself and the barracks that sit alongside of it. One of the capture points is the barracks, and then right at the end of the runway, that oil tanker location that I mentioned earlier, that's another one of the capture points. Now, the end of the runway is quite a lot further down the island, and you can actually use the lagoon again at this point and one of the dinghy boats, and you can flank all the way round the airstrip and get right to the back of it and then attack from there. The first time we did it, I think we had about 8 or 9 people across 2 dinghy boats that pushed right into the back of the sector, and the enemy team just had absolutely no idea that we were coming, and we really caught them by surprise. I think we actually managed to capture that flag point, and then we pushed back up the other way, up the airfield towards the barracks, but by the time we got there, the enemy team had recaptured the point behind us. And then I believe the final sector, I think it pushes onto the small island just off of Wake Island for another all-out assault finish, a little bit like Mount Suribachi, but of course you're not going right up a mountain here, you're kind of just pushing into the last defender base. But as I say, we didn't actually get to that point because the capture session was kind of short and DICE wanted to show us the Conquest version of the map. The experience that I had though in Breakthrough, I did actually really enjoy it. The shape of the island suits that linear push through, all those different staging areas, all those different capture points, and the 64-man chaos in this new theatre, it really does bring back that epic scale that's been missing from previous Battlefield 5 maps. By playing the map on Breakthrough, you do get a very different experience than any of the previous iterations of Wake Island in other games, because of course Breakthrough didn't exist in those previous games. The game mode plays completely different to almost anything that's come before it, so it sounds odd to say this, but it kind of felt natural that Wake Island works so well on Breakthrough. And I think that's a credit to the game mode as much as it is to the design of the map. Of course, Breakthrough isn't the only game mode that's going to be supported for Wake Island. Conquest is also available. DICE has chosen to use the Conquest Assault layout, meaning that the defending team has initial control of all of the flag points on the map, and they can spawn at any of those flags when the round starts. That makes things a little bit more difficult for the attacking team. Conquest Assault really isn't my favourite game mode in Battlefield, but thematically here on Wake Island, I guess it makes sense for the mode to be active. For veteran players, it's going to feel very similar for you, very familiar. You're going to be right at home, moving around the map by air, land vehicle, or across the water in boats. As I said at the start of the video, it's really the same old Wake Island that you know and love, but this time it's not in Battlefield 3 in a modern day setting or 2142. It's set back in World War II again. I really do wish that I could show you some gameplay because I really enjoyed playing on Wake Island again. It felt like it really fitted into the style that DICE is going for with this specific chapter for Battlefield 5, and because we're seeing it release a little bit later into 2019, it's kind of giving me the idea that there might be more Pacific maps coming after that into the new year. I have absolutely no information to confirm that's true. It's just how I'm looking at things happening. I'm like, why would Wake Island release a month later? Yes, it is true that it isn't quite finished, but if it's not quite finished, but it was started later than the other maps, does that mean that we're going to see a couple more maps for the Pacific in the future? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but it is true that Wake Island isn't quite finished, so that's why I can't show you gameplay. So there you go, as much as I can really do to tell you about Wake Island at this earlier stage. If or when I get the chance to play it again before the launch, maybe capture some gameplay, I'll do my best to get something up here for you all to see, but considering we're only a month or so away from its launch anyway, I wouldn't be surprised to see this come to the game without any further capture sessions or anything like that. But the fact that Wake Island was shown at the end of the Pacific trailer, I'd love it if we had a proper Wake Island trailer for Battlefield 5. That would be really cool. Thanks very much for watching today. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section, and drop this video a like if you enjoyed it. The dislike button is there if you didn't. Until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.